What's up, guys? So we're going to be doing my October 2021 side deck tier list. So yeah, I mean, as you can see, there's so many different options. What I want you to do though is put in the comments your top 3 side deck cards for this format. Let me know what you guys are always going to be caught with in this format. Yeah, make sure you subscribe to this video, show the channel some love. I've been doing pretty awesomely recently, so thank you guys. Carry on showing me that love. Let's get to 300 subscribers nice and quickly. But to start off with, we're going to go with Artifact Lancia. Now, what's really interesting about Artifact Lancia, Artifact Life, and these cards is that these cards are, in my opinion, so awesome for some matchups. They're literally game winning for certain matchups, but then it's like you go into others and they're not relevant. Having said that, that's what's perfect about a side deck when you have cards like these. I mean, I never would want to be caught without it. Now, going into the next format, this is the Burst of Destiny format. I do think Artifact Lancia is going to jump up into the A tier. Before, I might have put it a bit low in the B tier, but I'll say that Flunderies and Sword Soul are both decks that are going to be doing a bit of banishing. We've still got Tri-Brigades running around. They're a bit frustrating. We've still got Invoked running around. There's just quite a few decks that if they start banishing, they can go nuts. Phantom Knight is another good example. Really hurts them if you Lancia. I had no idea actually, but if you Lancia Phantom Knights, they actually can't activate a huge amount of their effects, which is pretty nice. They're probably just gonna have to end on something like a Dragoon Pass. But yeah, definitely I do like Lancia going into the next format. And similarly with Scythe, I would say it's going to be an interesting thing. That whole artifact, either running 3 Lancia on its own or running 3 Scythe plus, 3 Sanctum plus Scythe, I definitely think for similar reasons is going to be good, because virtually every deck is extra deck. Other than Flunderies, pretty much everything in the meta right now is abusing the extra deck. If you lock off the extra deck, they can't play the game. So these are both A tier hand traps that, yeah, you definitely want to be having something in your side deck to deal with that generically deals with so many decks. And in ST, I'm going to put Dark Green and More. Dark Green and More is... I don't think I've had a side deck without this card in a very long time. I mean, it's just such a good card. The ability to instantly negate the whole board is great. And the thing is, look, there's a slight weakness with Dark Rune No More as always. If your deck's engine can't naturally clear the board, it's going to be a bit of a problem. But to be honest, if you're playing a meta deck, if you're playing competitively, you shouldn't be playing a deck that can't do that. That can't somehow capitalize on negating the entire board. It's hard to really come as generic as that, really just negating all monsters. I mean, it's so awesome. Definitely S tier hand trap. I think that should be in every person's side deck. DD Crow, look, you guys, if you watch my hand trap tier list, you know that I don't have a huge love for this card. I just find it too low impact, and yes, normally I'd say potentially it could go in the side deck, but the problem isn't so much that it's hugely terrible in the side deck, it's that there are so many other cards I'd rather run. If I want to deal with someone's graveyard, I don't want to run DD Crow and just deal with one card. I want to get rid of their entire graveyard, and that's my problem with it at the moment. I just think it's too low impact for the format. I think there's too many different decks that don't care if you banish one card. I mean, for me, it's just not really worth running. So that's why for me, DD Crow definitely is going to be bottom of C tier, maybe even D tier. I'll leave it in C tier for now, but definitely bottom of C tier, maybe even D tier. Lightning Storm is another A tier hand trap in my opinion. Definitely got to play it in my opinion. If you've got like Lightning Storm, what I really like about it before I start rambling is Lightning Storm gives you versatility. Lightning Storm is usually obviously going to be used to deal with back row, but it does deal with a lot of decks and monsters as well. So for example, Tri-Brigades are typically going to put up 2 or 3 attack position monsters as their end board. Sometimes only one, but usually 2 or 3, or they'll put up 2 and then summon another one. You're going to have Sword Soul, they typically end on 2 attack position monsters. Even PK, even though they end on a Dragoon, they'll end on other attack position monsters, and that's what I like about Lightning Storm. It's just so versatile. It really gives me the flexibility to not have to dedicate certain Backrow removal cards. Now, having said that, the disadvantage of Lightning Storm is that it's not chainable, but I think the ability to kind of kill everything in reward for having this non-chainable card, I think it's just awesome, and I do think it does belong in everyone's side deck. Denko Sekka. Denko Sekka is an interesting one. I thought it's an awesome card for ages. Now, Denko Sekka is in this position with a couple of other side deck cards like Sphere Mode and Lava Golem, where it would be amazing, or it is amazing, if your deck doesn't require its normal summon. Back when Pendulums used to be in the meta, for example, Denko Sekka was one of the best side deck cards because you instantly stop things like Anti-Spell and Imperial Order or Solemn from even being a problem for you. However, most decks do need that normal summon. That's where the disadvantage of Denko Sekka comes in. It's not only that you need a deck that doesn't really need to set cards. You can set cards with Denko Sekka, but it's like there's a whole game around how you have to do it. And you need a deck that doesn't need a normal summon, and there's just not enough decks. Shifter is another deck. Shifter is another card in this category where It's only for very specific decks that can use it, but the decks that can use it definitely should be using it. So if your deck is one that uses Denko, I definitely think it should go in. I'll put it a bit lower than these two because while it is a good card, Backrow isn't the only thing we care about this format. There are a lot of monster heavy decks. Pankratops, A tier definitely. Pankratops, and I'm actually going to put above both of these just because it's so generic. It's so generic, it's so good, whether you're in versus a control deck, whether you're in a Backrow deck. Funnily enough, for a while, when I'm against a Backrow deck, Pankratops is often going to be part of my side deck package. I'll put in like 2 Lightning Storm, 1 Pankratops, 3 evenly match, something like that. Just because what's really nice about Pankratops is that Pankratops, it's just generically good against those kind of decks. If you're against old guys and you have Pankratops, it's a bit frustrating for them because you can leave it on the board and beat over monsters, and then if they try and do anything to it, suddenly they've got Backrow removed, and so it ends up often trading really well for you. So that's what I really like about this card. So yeah, definitely I think it should always be in the side deck. Cosmic Cyclone, it is a really good card. I wouldn't say it's amazing. I think as chainables go, that's probably its biggest advantage, the fact that you can chain it in response to other cards. But in spite of that, yeah, I'm not the hugest fan of Cosmic just because it's not enough sometimes. I don't want to just get rid of one problem card. I want to get rid of multiple, and that's probably my biggest issue with Cosmic. Definitely not a bad card at all, by the way. But let's say top of B tier. Definitely top of B tier. Another thing about Cosmic is I play a lot of banishing decks, and this is a little bit of a pro tip I'll give you guys. If you're playing a deck like Virtual, a deck like Tri Brigade, and you know people are going to be siding a card like Lancear against you, in my opinion, don't put something like Cosmic in your side deck, because people are going to be siding Lancear against you anyway, which means you're going to activate that Cosmic, and now suddenly your Cosmic is dead. Use another card like Twin Twisters or something, and then you have the advantage of not having your side deck weak to other people's side deck as well. That's just my 2 cents, but it does work pretty well for me, and that's why I tend to not go into it. Cycle Reader is an amazing card. It's just a bit specific because it only really deals with Drytron, and I guess maybe, I don't know, like Invoked a tiny bit. Oh, sorry, Invoke Shadow Dogmatica a tiny bit. But really Drytron is the only deck that affects. However, it's Stone Cold Stunner on Drytron, and Drytron is one of, if not the best deck of the format at the moment. So definitely a really good card, even though it only deals with one deck. What I would say is look at your locals. I mean, if you're going to a premier event, you can probably miss out on this for other cards, but if you're at the locals tier, if you're at regionals tier, you know everyone around you. If you're somewhere where you know there's a lot of Drytron, I would advise siding this. Otherwise, you can get away with not, but it is awesome against Drytron. It will really hurt them. Anti-Spell Fragrance, this one definitely is going to be another A tier hand trap. I mean, look, we've already seen how OP Imperial Order is. Now, Anti-Spell obviously isn't as strong as Imperial Order, but it's still a really good spell. One of the nice things about Anti-Spell as well is that obviously you can set up in your turn and use your spells as quickly as possible, and then on your opponent's turn you've really slowed down their game plan, which makes it super hard to out, and especially because decks nowadays can kill you so quickly. I mean, it's just a really great card. So yeah, definitely recommend Anti-Spell Fragrance. It's going to be so good, and it will just outright win certain matchups like Sky Striker. They literally, it's like, what are they doing? Unless they have the response then and there, very hard for them to out a card like that. Point a Red Lotus is definitely going to be A tier, if not bottom of S tier. You know what? I'm actually going to put it, no, I won't put it S tier, but I'll put it top of A tier. A Point of Red Lotus, I really love this card. Going first, it's just amazing games 2 and 3, because what's going to happen is you're going to go first, especially as a combo deck. You'll go first, you'll set up your board, and you know your opponent's going to side like a million cards specifically for your strategy. So what better than a card that lets you look at their hand and go, you know what? Let me see exactly what you have, so I have perfect knowledge of what I need to negate, and also I can get rid of one of those cards. I mean, this is just so strong. Really great card, and I definitely think if you're playing a combo deck, or not even necessarily a combo deck, because, well, I don't know if you count Tri Brigade as combo deck, but I have a mate who plays this in Tri Brigade, and I mean, it's just great in that as well. If you're playing the kind of deck where it's like you tend to lose to 1 or 2 specific cards, you tend to lose a couple of different side deck cards, this is a really good way to kind of insulate your board, and it just allows you to kind of combo off, go insane game 1, go into insane turn 1, then turn 2 your opponent can't do anything because you've used this. Turn 3 you win the game because they weren't able to really out your board, which is amazing. Beast King Alpha, so this card I really like it, but I'm actually going to put it in D tier, and this is a hot take, I know. So this is the problem with Beast King Alpha. It's a couple of things. Firstly, because of the way the card is, it's so horrible in certain matchups. So Beast King Alpha, obviously you're going to be using this to out monsters on the board, but the problem with Beast King Alpha, I would say, is firstly, it's relying on, it has its own conditions, for example. So you need to use this first pretty much because you need to have less attack than your opponents, which is a bit frustrating. But then moving on from that, Beast King Alpha, after you've removed after you've removed your opponent's monster from the board, which typically it's only going to be removing one problematic monster, it's in your hand. It's just this brick, and it's like, yeah, potentially you can use it next turn, but it hasn't really done anything to advance your game state much. You've maybe hurt your opponent a tiny bit, but you haven't really done much to put you in the game. Sometimes in certain board states you can bring it out again, now you have a bit of a body, but even then I'd rather just run Dark Ruler no more. And I think this tends to be my philosophy on cards like this. I would rather just run the better card. And that's the problem with this. If Dark Ruler didn't exist, if Lava Golem and Kaijus didn't exist, then maybe I would run this, but I can't think of a scenario where I'd rather run this than those cards, and that's my biggest issue with Beast King Alpha. It's just not really doing the job at the moment. It is a good card, I would say, but I would say it's not worth running at the moment. Maybe in very specific decks, but by and large, maybe if you're running, yeah, like a Beast King Kaiju deck, for example, like similar to what you would do with Fairy Tail Luna, then yeah, I would go ahead and run it. But by and large, I just don't like it that much. It's just a bit slow. I don't, oftentimes as well, I don't want to put, I mean, if it's an extra deck monster, great. But if it's not an extra deck monster, I don't want to put it back in your hand. I don't want you to even have it. I want to get rid of it, not so you can just summon it again. Like I said, as well, another thing as well is, as we're moving forward, we're moving into a format that has more negates. So the format we had before didn't really have negates, it had disruption. And the thing about formats with negates is cards like this become infinitely weaker, because what's going to happen is you're going to activate this, you're going to special summon it, you're going to try to use this effect, so your opponent's just going to go negate, and then it's not doing anything. Now, I might be proven wrong, it might become a bit more relevant, but right now I definitely think it is not the best hand trap. You shouldn't really be running it. There are much better choices. On the other hand, Kaijus I do think are great. If you're running Kaijus, then run Beast King, by the way. But Kaijus I do think are awesome this format, just because they're going to be some really frustrating monsters to deal with. Baroness de Fleur is probably one of the best examples of a monster you just want a Kaiju, because it can just easily negate and just do a lot of problems. It's like budget Dragoon, pretty much. I mean, it's going to be popping cards on the field and negating anything. It's pretty awesome. So yeah, definitely I think Kaijus are going to be really, really good this format, and you definitely are going to be you'll be well rewarded if you drop 3 of them in your side deck. Ice Dragon's Prison. So Ice Dragon's Prison, I'm going to put that in the B tier, and I'd say a bit above Cycle Read. It's a similar card. Now, Ice Dragon's Prison is best against cards like Dragoon, for example. If your opponent makes Dragoon, almost certainly they're going to be live. Your Ice Dragon's Prison is going to be live against them and other decks as well. And what I really like about Ice Dragon's Prison is, like I said before, its versatility. It's not just going to be used ultimately to kill your opponent. Sometimes you can use it basically just as a free monster reborn, and then use it to like make another link material or whatever, which is really, really, well, not monster reborn, Call of the Haunted. But yeah, I think it's definitely a really, really good card. And what's even better is that it's just been reprinted in the 2021 Megatins. So it's actually worth the money. Before, I think it was sitting around £30-40, now it's about £13 in the UK. I'm sorry, I don't know what that is in dollars. I don't know, maybe $20 or whatever. But yeah, it's cheap enough that I definitely think it's you can consider it in your side deck. There are other options, but I definitely do like Ice Dragon's Prison. And if you're playing a Backrow deck, to be honest, you can even possibly get away with a main deck in this, because it's that good sometimes. Phantazmay. Now, what's really sad is Phantazmay is a great card, but it's going to go to the bottom of BTR. This format at the moment, like literally at this specific second, I would say it's probably top of B tier, bottom of A tier. However, as we go into the next format, we've got a lot of decks that don't need to link summon. We're going to have things like Flundery, Sword Soul, Lyrilusk. I mean, these decks don't really have to link summon. They can get away with, their standard combos are not going to be link summon often, and as a result, it makes Phantazmay less useful. And then moving it into your side deck, I'd rather have a card that deals with the problem. I don't want a card that's going to just draw me stuff. Now, there's specific matchups where Phantazmay is amazing and I would side them in. So Sky Strike is a great example of a matchup where I'd really want to side in Phantazmay, because it's going to give me a draw and it's going to be protection. But Sky Strike is not big enough threat in the format at the moment, in my opinion, to warrant running Phantazmay in your side deck. So, I mean, again, this is going to depend on the population of your locals. This is going to depend on exactly what is a problem for your deck as well, but I think you can probably get away without running some Phantazmay this format. So yeah, great card, just slightly falling out of favor. White Howling. So White Howling, let me actually get the text up for you guys, just in case you're not familiar with this card, but I actually do think it's a really good card. So White Howling. Its effect reads: if you control water monster, target one spell in your opponent's graveyard, banish it, and if you do, for the rest of this turn, negate all spell effects on your opponent's field. So White Howling I'm actually going to put in a similar place of the BTA. You're going to see a lot of cards I'm going to put here. A lot of the cards in the BTA are going to be cards that are very specific against certain matchups, but if you're not playing that matchup, then it's not going to do amazing. So White Howling is really good against spell heavy matchups, things like your Shadows, your Strikers. It's going to be awesome if you are playing a deck that has water monsters. So if you're playing like a Mermail, if you're playing a Rogue Phantasm Spiral, if you're playing Paleo, it's going to be so good to have this card, because it will literally win the game for you. They're going to get screwed. They're going to activate their Shadow Fusion. You're going to use this to negate it. I mean, what's the plan? But if you're not playing a deck that can abuse this, then obviously it's not going to be great for you. So I definitely think this is a really good card. I think actually Skystrike can play this, for example, because they have Shizuku. But if your deck can't play this, it's a bit of a shame. But I do think White Howling is a great card, and I do think it is worthy of, I'd say, bottom of B tier. Definitely, if you can run it, it's something you can consider. Then next we've got Blizzard, and this is another one I think I may have to read out for some people. So let me just get that effect text up. So Blizzard. Now Blizzard was released in Rise of the Duelist, and it's funny because when it was announced, it was basically, I mean, people thought it was going to do a lot, and then for some reason no one's touched it. But I do think it has a lot of potential. I'm not sure why we haven't seen it yet, but anyway, yeah. So the effect reads: target one face-up spell your opponent controls. This turn, negate the activated effect of that spell and all spells in the field with that same original name. If the targeted card would be sent to the opponent's graveyard this turn, it's added to their hand instead. So it basically negates a spell. However, it doesn't put the spell in the graveyard. It goes straight back to their hand. But it's really good. I mean, against Cross-Out Designator, for example, this is going to be a great counter card. And it's going to be a counter card that's not so specific, obviously, because it's going to counter Cross-Out Designator, but it's not only for that. You can negate Call by the Grave with this. You can negate, like I said before, similar to White Howling, you can negate power spells like Shadow Fusion with this. Magical Meltdown, you can negate those with this. So it is a good card. I'm surprised we haven't seen it, but I definitely think if you guys haven't tried it, I think it's worth trying in your side deck, because it's going to definitely do a job. I'd say top of B tier. Top of B tier, definitely. It's a really interesting card, and especially with the release of Cross-Out Designator. If you're someone who can't afford Cross-Out Designator, this is a great card to put in. So if your opponent tries to use it against you, you've got this to negate them. Contact C is definitely going to be an A tier hand trap. It flat out wins certain matchups. Your Tri-Brigade, your Prank Kids, things like that. Not even just those decks, even your Shadow deck, your Shadow and Invoked matchups, for example, it will hard stop them if they activate a fusion spell and then you summon this. If they summon a card and then you summon this, they get screwed half the time, because if they haven't got a target in their extra deck, or if they haven't got a link monster in their extra deck to link this into, I mean, they're going to be finished. And even if they have, a lot of the times you're going to force them to use a link monster they don't want to use on this. A lot of Tri-Brigade players are not going to be running it out to this in their main deck. Funnily enough, so I've been playing a lot of Madolche lately, and I specifically put Phoenix in my extra deck just so that if I get Contact Seed, I get screwed. Because if you guys don't know, if you get Contact Seed in Madolche, I mean, it's curtains for you. You're not playing the game. You haven't even got a monster tribute over it, so it really sucks. But yeah, definitely Contact C, definitely going to be A tier hand trap. Now, hot take, guys. Warning point is S tier. And look, let me explain it to you. So there's another trap that has been amazing in the side deck for me this moment, and that's Different Dimension Ground. And Warning Point, I think, does the exact same thing, or it fills the same role, but it does it in a slightly different way. And I'm going to read out Warning Point just for you guys who aren't familiar with Warning Point. I think it's amazing. So when a monster is summoned, this turn, that face-up monster cannot attack, its effects are negated. Also, it cannot be used as material for fusion, synchro, XYZ, or link summon. So this does a similar job to DDG, where they're basically, and Shared Ride, where your goal is you're going first and you want your opponent to just pass on a subpar board. And that's what I think is so great about this. But what I really like about this card, and this is what No Material should have been. If No Material was this, No Material would have been definitely a tier hand trap. But the problem is No Material obviously has that clause of graveyard and blah blah blah, which really makes it a lot weaker. But in spite of that, this effect is insane. And I think Warning Point, if you need a card similar to DDG that needs to go in your side deck, and it's for when you're going first and you just want to kind of stun your opponent, get them to pass, and then you kill them, this really needs to be there. I think Warning Point is so good. It literally, almost every matchup at the moment, almost every deck in the meta at the moment, if you Warning Point one of their first cards, they are finished. Now, I know some of you are going to be like, why not just use the card like Solemn Strike and stuff? And don't get me wrong, Solemn Strike is a great card, but what I really like about Warning Point is this is also good going second. This is going to be great when, if your opponent tries to go into something like a Boros Dragon or Access Code Talker on their turn, oh sorry, on the third turn after you've used after they've built up their board and you weren't able to break it, Warning Point is going to be able to stun that card again, and then they're not even going to be able to attack. They can't even attack, guys. They can't even attack if you use Warning Point. I think this card is great. I don't know why people aren't playing it, but I mean, I've been having it in my side deck. 3 of these in my side deck, 3 of these and 3 DDG in my side deck, and it's just so good. I mean, it just stuns people. They have no idea. When someone used this against me, funny enough, that was my exact reaction. I used it and I was just like, what? I've never seen this card, and then I proceeded to die the next turn. So yeah, really great card. Definitely think Warning Point is deserving the ST, and you guys, if you haven't tried it, give it a try. Get Out, I'm actually going to put in the B tier. Get Out is a great card this format. We've got a couple of different decks. As usual, you're going to be hearing me say these decks loads, but this is actually Lyrilusk and Sword Soul, for example, are 2 decks that will very frequently put up 2 extra deck monsters on the board and then have hand traps and stuff. And so Get Out becomes really good against those decks, but you can just bounce those decks. So it's a slightly better Compulse, but we're in a format where a lot of decks will have 2 or more extra deck monsters on the field, and so you use this and you're going to get a lot of value out of it. Necro Valley is going to be bottom of A tier, but definitely a very good side deck card this format now. The way you're obviously going to be doing this, it depends on your deck. There's different ways. You might be getting out with Metaverses, you might be getting out with Demise of the Land, you might just be flat out plopping on the board in your turn. But Necro Valley, it just hits everything at the moment. What's really nice about Necro Valley is that it doesn't negate. So for example, it's not like a ghost, it's not like a Skullmeister or a ghost or a Ghost Ogre, for example, that your opponent can call by or something. They need specific Backrow Removal because it's not negating anything, it's simply just stopping effects moving out of the graveyard, and so there's pretty much no way to get around it. So I really do like Necro Valley. I do think it's worth playing at the moment, if you can play it. I mean, it does suffer again for the same problems as certain decks, where if your deck is super reliant on the graveyard or you can't clear this, then you probably don't want to play it. So for example, if I was playing Tri Brigade, I probably wouldn't want to play this. It's a bit too risky because my Revolt is completely dead, and how am I clearing it? Whereas if I'm playing Eldritch, I mean, it's not too hard to out this myself with my Golden Lord from the graveyard, because in case you guys don't know, with Eldritch, the Golden Lord's effect in the graveyard is to add to hand, then special summon. So you use its effect, as cost it will remove the Necro Valley, Golden Lord will go to your hand, and then you can special summon it. So for example, in certain decks, it's really good, and if you can run it, I do think it's worth running its format. Moving next, we've got Shared Ride, and I'll say bottom of B tier for Shared Ride. Shared Ride is a really great card. Probably the biggest weakness of Shared Ride is that it's not directly doing anything to your opponent, but just the chance of drawing 3, 4, 5 cards off is similar to the Maxi challenge. It will make a lot of opponents simply stop playing the game. Because they're just afraid of losing by sheer card advantage. Now, obviously, this isn't great in certain situations. What's going to happen sometimes is your opponent knows they can kill you. They know that it doesn't really matter what you have, that you're not going to be able to stop them killing you, and so they will just kill you. And that's why I'd say it's bottom of B tier. But I still think it's worth playing. You definitely want to be having those copies of Shared Ride. Again, this is another kind of going first. I just want my opponent to not play the game, and then I kill them. That's when you run this card. Crossout Designator, top of A tier, awesome card. I mean, I've been running it. It should be in your main deck, but for some people, you're definitely going to want to put it in your side deck with maybe 1 or 2 Crossout Designator options. But yeah, it's just a really good card, to be honest. It's basically Call by the Grave on crack, but then it also negates other things as well. So yeah, Crossout Designator, one of the best cards of the format. Definitely really doing the job of just negating those hand traps, negating those going second cards. I mean, you can use this to negate things like Judgment. You can use this to negate things like Dark Ruler. The only limitation, obviously, is what you put in your deck. So yeah, Crossout Designator is a really good card. I think if you have it, it should be in your main deck, but if it's not in your main deck, then it probably should be in your side deck. But yeah, Rivalry of Warlords, gosh, what a tongue twister. Really great card. It's not hitting everything at the moment, and that's probably kind of where it goes in and out of match. So this and goes in, they're basically the same card, but one deals with type, one deals with attribute. But definitely I think it's going to be a B tier hand trap. It's not bad at all. It's just really a case of, at the moment, we've got a lot of monotype. Not even a lot, we've got a few monotype archetypes, so they don't care about this. But going forward, or at least at the moment, we don't have monotype, but we have a few monotype. But going forward, we're going to have a couple of multi-type, which makes it a little bit weaker. But I still definitely think it is worth playing. So this is Soul Drain, Mind Drain, I can't remember, but this is the one that affects the graveyard. I'm actually going to put in the C tier, and my problem with it is just a bit slow, and also I have to pay cost for it. I think there's a much better version of this card. I mean, it does affect Banished as well, which is kind of cool, but I just think there's much better versions of this card, similar to Beast King Alpha, that you could play. Similar to Beast King Alpha and to Draw on Lockbird, there are better versions of this card that you could play, in my opinion. And so as such, I personally wouldn't run it. But it is a good card in terms of for what it's doing. It's just a case of, like I said, if you could run a better card, why not just run that better card? But yeah, definitely going to be bottom of C tier in my opinion. Then next we've got Skill Drain. So Skill Drain, really great card. It's kind of hard to decide where to put Skill Drain. I'm actually going to put in the C tier. I think it's not as amazing, simply because it's at 1. I think that's the biggest weakness of Skill Drain. The fact that it's at 1 means that I can't really rely on it, and it's not it's at 1, but it's not like Imperial Order where it's going to outright win certain matchups. Skill Drain isn't winning matchups at the moment. It's a great card, but not enough decks care about having that one card on the board because people are running Backrow Removal, and this isn't stopping that. And it's not stopping their graveyard effects, it's not stopping their hand effects, it's not stopping their banished effects. So yeah, if Skill Drain was at 3, I would probably move it up to B, maybe even A tier. But at 1, it's not reliable enough, and then also it's just not doing enough for how unreliable it is. So yeah, definitely Skill Drain is going to be there. Token Collector is going to be an A tier hand trap. Well, actually no, I won't put A tier. I'll put Token Collector at B tier for now. This is going to be really good against Sword Soul, but even though I'm pretty sure Sword Soul will be meta, we don't 100% at the moment. We're not 100% sure if Sword Soul is going to be best deck of the format or one of the best decks, and so just for now I'll put in B tier, but that's tentative. It could potentially move up to that S or A tier depending on how strong Sword Soul gets. Next up we have Summon Limit. So Summon Limit, really good card. I'm going to put it at probably top of A tier. I think Warning Point is better, but like I said, it's those cards that you put in going first just to stun certain decks. The thing about Summon Limit that's kind of good and bad is that if your deck can run Summon Limit, sometimes it's great. But if your deck can run Summon Limit, it probably struggles to kill one turn. I mean, not always, sometimes, but you can't afford to run Summon Limit, in my opinion, for example, in like Phantom Knights, for example, because you need to summon more than twice a turn, unless you're hoping that you can just broadsword and your opponent hasn't got any negate for that. And so that's the main problem with it. But I do think it's a great card if you can run it. I just think it's a bit slow. Well, not slow, it's a bit low impact. Yeah, so it's nice sometimes where you'll bait your opponent into some limit, but I mean, if they're Backrow Removal, you're finished and you haven't actually stopped them. I like Chainables. I don't like continuous cards as much as Chainables, because Chainables obviously use it. If your opponent can't react then and there, they're screwed. This, it's on the field, which means your opponent knows what they're dealing with and they have time to out it. So yeah, Summon It, definitely A tier, but I'm not necessarily the best. Different Dimension Ground is going to be above Summon Limit, I think. I'll put it top of A tier. So similar to Warning Point, this is a really good card. I do think Warning Point, like I said, is the superior card, but I still think DDG is a great card. I mean, just the ability to lock off the graveyard for people is huge. I mean, so many decks, this is basically Shifter, and so many decks do have to just simply end their turn if they get hit by a different dimension ground. That's what makes it so nice. It's also kind of hard to counter, obviously. If your opponent tries to attack it, it's like I said, it's a chainable. So if your opponent tries to kind of instantly stun your back row with a Cosmic Cyclone or something, I mean, you're just going to activate this and they're screwed. So you can wait to activate this, you can activate straight away. It's always going to be pretty nice. So yeah, I really do like that DDG. I think it is worth playing in your side deck. Twin Twister is going to be bottom of A tier. Yeah, just a great card generically to remove back row. Like I said, I prefer this over Cosmic Cyclone just because removing 2 cards. Yes, you are paying the cost from your hand, but I'm okay with that. The other thing as well I like about this is that Cosmic Cyclone, if your opponent sets more than 1 card, for example, and then you target a card, obviously then there's no pressure on the other cards. But Twin Twisters, because you're targeting 2 cards, you're putting pressure on more cards on the board. So often your opponent is going to have to activate at least one of those with Twin Twister, because how likely is it that they've set 2 cards and neither of them is a threat? I mean, if you're in that situation, you're probably winning anyway. So most of the time when you use Twin Twisters, it's going to be pretty awesome. Yeah, definitely think it is worth playing at the moment. Super Poly. So Super Poly is definitely going to be bottom of C tier. It's not a bad card at all, however. I mean, if you're playing Invoke Shadow, Dogmatica or some sort of Invoke Shadow variant, it's good. But it's just not enough decks are weak to it at the moment. When it's good, it's amazing, almost an S tier hand trap. But at the moment, there's just not really enough decks that can abuse it. If we had some more wind and earth targets in terms of fusion monsters, it would definitely be better. But unfortunately, that just makes it a bit weak. Eradicate Epidemic, I'm going to put that at the D tier. Eradicate Epidemic should be an amazing card, but the main problem actually is just that you need to tribute a big ass attack monster, a big ass dark monster, and so having to tribute a big ass dark monster to get its effect is what makes it so weak. Otherwise it'll be great, cutting all the spells out of your opponent's hand for the next 3 turns, and you get to look at their hand. I mean, that's amazing, but unfortunately it's just a bit too conditional to use, and we don't have enough decks that are willing to just sacrifice a big ass dark body. So yeah, if we did, then it would be a bit better, but unfortunately as a result, I definitely think that Eradicate Epidemic is just not worth playing. Solemn Strike, I'm going to put the bottom C tier. It's not a terrible card, but I would just say that it's not as good, like I said, as our top options. It's costing you life points. It's a little slow because you can only use it on, even though I know this is not a turn, I'm going to say it. You can only use it on inherent summons. So you can only use it on an actual summon. A summon that doesn't start chain, basically. Is there are other summons that you can use this to stop, or you can use it to negate an effect. But if you want to negate an effect, there are better cards. If you want to stop a summon, there are better cards. And so that's the main problem with Solemn Strike. It's just not amazing at the moment. Definitely going to be a C tier card. Moving on from there, we have Droll and Lockbird. And Droll was actually amazing last format. I still think it's still probably going to be amazing. So I'd say top of B tier. Yeah, really good card in certain matchups. Against your Drytrons, against your Invoke-Shadow Dogmaticas and stuff like that, it's going to be great. However, certain decks, you're going to activate Droll, they're going to laugh at you, and then they're going to kill you anyway. That's really what the problem is with Droll and Lockbird. That's historically been the problem, obviously. When it's good, it's really good. But then certain decks literally don't care all about it. They're only going to search once anyway. And so that's, I'd say, the main weakness of Droll. But yeah, definitely a B tier hand trap. Top B tier hand trap. Then another great A tier hand trap, evenly matched. Yep, I usually run evenly matched my deck. In fact, I'm even considering potentially moving it up to A tier. What do I think? I think I will put no, wait. I'll leave it in A tier. Evenly Match is a really good card. I'd say the biggest weakness of Evenly Match obviously is going to be that you're losing your battle phase for it, but the potential swinging advantage is just so big. And this is in most of my side decks. I'm usually running Evenly Matched. That's why for me I was thinking maybe S tier. However, I do know that there is obviously weaknesses in terms of not having your battle phase, not having cards on the field. Little things like that do make it a little bit weaker than others. But definitely I think it's a really good card. If you can run it, you pretty much should be running it. And it just outright, again, it's another card that's going to outright win certain matchups. Tri-Brigades and Prankades hate this card, obviously, because you can use even match and they lose their whole board. They don't play hard negates. Now, moving into the next format, and this is what was making me think maybe it'll go down to A tier a bit. The thing about evening match is that if you're in a format with hard negates, so against decks like Pendulums, against decks like Sword Soul with the Baroness, against decks like PK that have Dragoon, this is going to be less useful because they can just hard negate it, and so it's not doing anything. You're trading for an effect which you don't want to do. But in spite of that, it's still going to be a good card. We'll see how it performs for the next one. But yeah, definitely I'd say top of A tier for now. Triple Tactics Talent. So, hot take again. I'm actually going to put this at the bottom of B tier. In fact, I'm going to put it at the top of C tier. So, Triple Tactics Talent. And Konami knew what they were doing, waiting until now to reprint it. The problem with this card really is just that it's relying on your opponent too much. On your turn, there are better options. Call Battle Graven Crossout and Millennium Eyes Restrict are all better options than this, or at least on your turn when you're going first, and then on your turn when you're going second, your opponent probably will use a card. They will probably use a monster effect, but it's the kind of card similar to Gamma where if they see you use this, for example, in game one, they're never going to use an effect. Well, not never going to use, but they're going to be more careful about what effect they use on your turn. So if you do something like end your main phase trying to hope that they'll quickly use an effect, well, they're not going to because they know you've got TTT. And then also, its 3 effects, while being great, they're very conditional. So obviously, because it's waiting for your opponent to have used an effect first, which means they've probably negated or done something already, and then after that you get to draw 2 cards. But I mean, if you already use your normal summon, for example, if you already used a once per turn card, doesn't matter. Look in their hand. If they don't have a hand, doesn't matter. If they've used their hand trap again, do I really care if I can look in their hand? Stealing a monster again, it might come up, but if they've already used that monster's effect on the field, doesn't matter that much that you've stolen the monster. Yeah, TTT, not a bad card, but I definitely think it's just not as good as it used to be. I think it's easy to play around, and so as such, that's what I'm going to put in the C tier. Droplets. So Droplets is another one that's actually going to be in the C tier. And it really just comes down to the cost. The cost of Droplets of Droplets, having to send multiple cards from your hand. I mean, certain decks can abuse this to amazing efficiency. There are decks like Mech Knight Orcus, for example, where this is an S tier card. Or Eldritch, for example, where this is an S tier card. But if your deck isn't like that, and you need the cards in your hand to combo, you need the cards in your hand to play the game, this loses a lot of effectiveness. In my opinion, there are easier ways to negate monsters on the board for what it's doing. I'd rather, most of the time, the question becomes, can I just run Dark Ruin no more? If you're not running Dark Ruin no more because of the chainable aspect, and you're not a deck that can send cards to the graveyard, then this card becomes infinitely worse, because you're paying such a huge cost to negate monsters and reduce attack, which means that if you don't kill them, a lot of the times you've just lost a huge amount of advantage, and you might just die soon. So that's the problem with Forbidden Droplet. It's really sad, because when you look at the C tier cards, some of these cards should be insanely strong, but it's a combination of power creep and just wrong place, wrong time. I'd say that's really hurting these cards. Now, top of C tier, actually, I'm going to put Duster, and it's really because Lightning Storm exists. Yes, you can use Duster when they have monsters on the board, but in most situations, I would rather have Cosmic, Twister, or Lightning Storm. If I need to still deal with stuff where I have monsters on the board, I'd rather just use a Chainable. And then moving on from that, if I don't care, if I'm just want to use at the beginning of my turn, then Lightning Storm is infinitely better in every way. And so that's the main problem with Duster. It's not a bad card, but I'd say Lightning Storm power creeps it, and it's only at 1. When a card's only at 1 and it's not searchable, that definitely, in my opinion, lowers its effectiveness a lot, because you can't rely on it. It becomes a third less likely to be in your hand, so you can't rely on it. Silent Graveyard. Silent Graveyard is going to be a top B tier hand trap. Silent Graveyard is really, really good. This is a better version of Soul Drain or whatever this card down here was. Yeah, it's just a much better version. Being able to completely lock off your opponent's graveyard. Yes, it doesn't lock off the Banishone as well, but it's chainable. It's going to lock off the graveyard for that turn, so that in your turn you can do stuff. I mean, it's a really, really good card. Definitely think it is worth playing. Obviously, it's not going to hit every matchup. Certain decks don't have cards that necessarily activate in the grave, but if it's a deck like Shadow Dogmatica that has effects that activate in grave, this is going to be really, really good against them. So yeah, I do like Silent Graveyard a lot. Imperial Order. Of course, this is going to be A tier. Really, really good card in certain matchups. Now, the slight disadvantage obviously is that most of the time you want this going first. You don't really want it going second. And again, it's at 1, which is a bit of a shame, which is why most times it's better just having your main deck. When it comes up, it'll win. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But definitely a good card. Definitely I think it is worth playing in your side deck if you have the room. For example, if you're already playing anti-spells, Secret Villages. I didn't put Secret Village, by the way, but Secret Village will be the same place as Necro Valley. They're the same card to me. They're just dealing with different things, but the same card. But yeah, I definitely think Imperial Order is going to be worth being in that A tier. Lava Golem is also going to jump up to B tier. So this format, Lava Golem, I think is really, really, really good. A lot of decks, like I said, are going to be ending on 2 monsters. The main weakness of Lava Golem is going to be, can your deck actually run it? If your deck can run it, run it. If your deck can't run it, if your deck needs that normal summon, then you can't get away with it. But I definitely think it is really, really good. The reason why it's not as good as Denko Seke, in my opinion, is because you can deal with monsters, but you've given them a monster. I don't like giving my opponent cards. It does suck a bit. Yeah, you're burning them for 1,000 LP, but unless you're in time, it probably doesn't matter that much. But yeah, Gamma, I'm putting this at the bottom of C tier, not because it's bad, more because it should be in the S tier. It should be in your main deck, not in the S tier. I'm putting it in C tier because it should be in S tier. What kind of madness? No. C tier because I don't think Gamma's worth putting in your side deck. I think Gamma should be in your main deck if you can play it. If not, if it's not in your main deck, I don't think it's worth side deck. And if anything, Gamma a lot of the times is a card that I'll use in game 1 or 2, and then once my opponent sees it, I get rid of it, because good players don't get hurt by Gamma often. Once a good player sees that you have Gamma, they're gonna wait until a situation where the Gamma is not useful. And so yeah, definitely, I think Gamma, as good as it is a C tier, it shouldn't really be in fact, I'm actually going to put it in the D tier. It really shouldn't be in your side deck. This is a main deck card. You're taking 4 slots from your side deck for something this subpar. I don't think it's worth it. Quaking Mirror Force. So Quaking Mirror Force, this is going to be D tier. Right now, Battle Traps are just not doing the job. Yeah, unfortunately. You can't wait until your opponent's built a board, because they're either going to just pop your back row before you get to the battle phase or negate it, so it's not worth it. Skullmeister, really, really great card. This is what DD Crow wants to be. This is what DD Crow wants to be. I'm going to put it at the bottom of B tier. Yeah, it's just nice against certain matchups, a little bit specific, but in those matchups it becomes really, really awesome. Judgment. So Judgment is a weird one. The thing about Judgment is that in certain matchups it's so big. Going first is so big. Yeah, there's a couple of cards in the A tier where they could almost be S tier. But you know what? The reason why I'm not going to put in S tier is because it's not you don't always want Judgment. Paying half your life points is a big cost, and it's not always going to be amazing. I don't always want to pay half my life points to deal with Judgment, but when it's good, it's really, really good, and in certain situations I do. So for that reason why it's going to be an 80. I'd say it's a Point of Red Lotus is a very similar card. They even look similar, funnily enough. Both a guy pointing, but this guy looks like a gimp and this guy looks like God. But yeah, very similar cards. I think a Pointer is slightly better. It's a lower life point cost and you get hand knowledge on top of that. I'd say the reason why it's functionally the same obviously is because obviously a Pointer of the Red Lotus, you're going to be just taking the card out of their hand. Yeah, you've got a pair cost from your hand, but usually if you're using a Pointer, you have that, you've comboed already and you've got an extra card in your hand that you can use for it. But yeah, very similar cards. I definitely think a Pointer is slightly better, but Judgment is good. Not good enough that I think it should be in everyone's side deck, but I think it's good enough that if it's in your side deck, it's probably one of the best cards. Sphere Mode, similar to Lava Golem. It's going to be better this format if your deck doesn't need a normal summon, and it's going to be good against those combo decks. One of the things that we might see is combo decks potentially running one copy of something like Dark Rune No More, just so that they don't get hurt by that. And that's why I think Sphere Mode might come up a bit, but like I said, the biggest problem with this becomes specificity, and that's the story of the B tier. That's the story of half the cards in the B tier, where it's like, can your deck run it? Can your deck go without it? Sometimes, having said that, it doesn't even matter. Back in Pendulum format, it didn't matter if you needed your normal summon, because if they're going to negate your normal summon anyway, why not just Sphere Mode them, and then at least you've gotten rid of the problems. But yeah, definitely a good card, but just it's hard to advance your game state unless your deck doesn't need that normal summon to play with it. That's the main weakness with Sphere Mode. But yeah, moving on, Gozer Match is going to be the same as Rivalry of Warlords. Like I said, they're basically the same card. It just depends on the format. But yeah, Chalice is going to be 80. I think Chalice is great. Yeah, the weakness of Impermanence at the moment is obviously going to be that Cross-Out Designate exists, which means people are going to be occasionally negating it. And also, it's not nice to not have to have a card in the field. Chalice has that advantage of being able to just be used whenever, and also it has a bit of a niche usage in terms of damage. It negates a monster but gives it attack, so you can also use it to boost your monster's attack in the damage step, for example, which will come up sometimes. So yeah, definitely going to be an A tier card. Drowning Mirror Force, I'm going to put that at the bottom of D tier. Yeah, Battle Trap. D Barrier, on the other hand, I'm actually going to put that in the S tier. I think there are enough decks at the moment that we can get away with running D Barrier. It's like a better version of Sanctum. It doesn't deal with link decks, but we're going to be moving into a format where we've got a lot of non-link extra deck decks. And if you've got those kind of decks, it's awesome, because you can declare Ritual to cuck Drytrons, you can declare XYZ for Lyrilusk, you can declare Synchro for Virtual World, you can declare Fusion for your Shadow and Invoked variants. I mean, this card is really, really good, and I do think it is worth having at 3 in your side deck at the moment. Red Reboot, A tier, very good card. Main weakness of that obviously is going to be the life point cost, but to be honest, if you're killing your opponent afterwards, who cares anyway? But yeah, Red Reboot, definitely a really, really good card at the moment. Then we've got Shifter. If your deck can run Shifter, this card, you know, I'm actually going to put in the B tier, because along with the other, this is the best B tier hand trap. It's when you can use it, it's an S tier card. If your deck can use Shifter, if your deck can use Shifter, use Shifter. But not enough decks can use it. That's the main problem with Shifter. But it's just so good. It's basically a walking macro cosmos. I mean, it's just insane. But it's just not enough decks can use it. And I'd say that's the biggest weakness, obviously, for it. Nibiru. Now, Nibiru is actually, I'm going to move it down to B tier as well. And the thing is, like I said, hand traps in general become weaker because of cross-out. Combo decks are going to be more prepared for your hand traps. Now, when Called by the Grave is at 3, you still ran Ash Blossom. You don't not run a hand trap just because there's a negate to it. But it does mean it's weaker. It means that it's going to come up. There's going to be more situations now where your Nibiru ends up being dead. But yeah, I'd say that's the biggest problem. Cross-out existing definitely does weaken our Nibirus a little bit. Ghost Bell, I would say similar to Skullmeister, slightly weaker Skullmeister. Not a bad card, but same weakness as Nibiru because of hand traps. Yeah, Mystic Mine. So Mystic Mine, the thing about Mystic Mine is that right now it's good, but as we move into the next format where there's more hard negates, especially for decks like PK and stuff where they actually have negate this card, Mystic Mine does lose a lot of strength, because if your opponent can actually negate a card, then you activate Mystic Mine, they just negate it. You might as well have just had Dark Rune No More. So it is a good card when you can use it, but if you can't use it, you might as well have had another card. So I actually can say bottom of C tier just because of that. Right now it's good. Gates, Prank Kids and Tri Brigades, you activate a Mystic Mine, they can't do anything. They need to chain Revolt and get nothing, or Prank Kids need to chain their Pandemonium and get nothing. But beyond that, I would definitely say it's not really worth playing Mystic Mine. Then we've got Zombie World. So Zombie World I'm actually going to put in B tier. This is a really, really good card, again, for those Prank Kids, those Tri Brigade matchups, those Drytron matchups. Zombie World, they literally can't play through it. If you activate this against a Drytron player or or a Tri-Brigade player in game 1, you've probably won that game for free because they literally won't be able to do any of their plays. So yeah, really good card. Obviously, it's not good in every matchup, but in those matchups where it's good, it's similar to everything else, awesome. The reason being, by the way, is because Tri-Brigade monsters almost all, with the exception of Bear Brum, say Wing Beast or something like that for their materials. And for Drytron, ritual cards tribute, essentially. And Drytron, all the Drytron monsters tribute as well. You can't tribute under Zombie World. And also it changes them into zombies as well, and Drytrons, a lot of their cards need machines specifically, and so that's what makes Zombie World so good in those matchups. But yeah, so this is our tier list, and as you can see, one of the really interesting things at the moment is that there are a lot of good options in terms of side deck cards. I mean, we've got so many A and B tier side deck cards where it's like you could run this if you can, which is great because it's always nice when we have a varied field because it means we have a lot of options for countering our opponent. And I think this is a format, because of Crossout Designate, this is a format where you want to be unique. So poking into those B tier hand traps even, I think is worth it a lot of times. C tier maybe not, but going down into B tier I definitely think is going to be worth it this format, just so that you can always be playing around your opponent potentially countering you with Crossout. But yeah, thank you all for watching. This has been a super long video. I don't know if I'm going to split it into 2 or not, we'll see. But yeah, I'll talk to you all later. Peace.